Welcome along to the How You Say It podcast with myself, Graham Cogar. I am joined by a man who has dedicated his career to philosophy. He's got over 15 years experience in academia, but now he's changed over from the academic world to practical philosophy for personal exploration. He's a philosophy-focused coach, mentor, and consultant. John Stoszkowski. John, how are you?
I'm not too bad, Graham. How are you? Good to see you.
Not too bad. It's great to see you, John. We've met a few times. In fact, friend of the podcast, I think we could say, Daniel Massaro was one of the first guests I'd had, who's a good friend of yours, a colleague of yours, I should say, through the work you do. So I'm really interested in giving people an insight into what it is you actually do, because philosophy-focused coaching, mentoring, and consulting, it sounds brilliant. And well, I can say for myself, I've been on some of your cohorts and courses. I've really enjoyed them. So what is it you actually do?
Basically, I ruin people's lives. Is the way that I've come to think of it lately, in a positive way. So people say, well, like what's this course, what's that, and it genuinely is. I just like getting people thinking a bit differently about what they're doing in life, how they're doing it, why they're doing it that way. And in that sense, it genuinely can ruin their life, but hopefully for the better, because they just start seeing things a little bit differently to the way they did. And then that means that they might make little changes and their perspective changes on something that then sends them down a different life path. So it does ruin their life that they were living, I suppose. But like I say, hopefully for the better, and it just opens things up and gets better in that sense.
Well, I remember when we first started, you started off by saying you'll leave with more questions than answers, which is usually quite different for a training cohort or a sort of learning cohort, but you definitely do. And some of the questions that I was asking myself even led me into what we're doing right now today. So what kind of questions can people look for, or what kind of things are covered in these topics that you're discussing?
I suppose really it just boils down to life. So Danny, who you mentioned, to just frame one of the courses that we do called Being Well, that was based on a book that Danny and I wrote. So Danny's PhD research, actually, which I'm sure he spoke about on the episode he did, was very much around existential philosophy, and he was applying it to a high performance sports setting. So like how can really elite athletes live better through sport in many ways, and that then has just like evolved and it's merged, and now there's a course on it, and it's pretty much existential philosophy. So it's just getting people really thinking about what makes them tick, what's going on underneath the surface that maybe at a societal level we tend not to maybe like speaking about too much, those sort of deeper questions that you have about things like meaning and purpose and just how you're living your life from your perspective. So we talk a lot about the fishbowl, the goldfish bowl, you looking out from your perspective. Society tends to love like looking in at people externally, like commenting on them, especially in sport and fields like that, which you're involved with as well, where people like pundits, they love commenting on people, don't they? And like critiquing them and like, I can't believe they did that. What a stupid choice that was. They should have just done this. But only you really know what it's like for you in that moment, living that life with your history and your perspective. So the Being Well course, especially, it's very much about that. Let's have a look at what some philosophers through time have been saying about some of these aspects, and hopefully just helping that, using that to help you change your perspective and just get a different read on things. And yeah, like I say, ruining your life a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we had interviewed Neil Lennon, who actually talked exactly about the commentators. He said that pundits, particularly in football, he said they often forget that they've been there when it's been bad as well as when it's been great. You can't go through a sporting life without having disappointments. I think I remember speaking to somebody years ago who completely shattered the illusion of being a professional footballer when we visited a local primary school, and this footballer who played for a local football team, he started off to speaking to a group of primary school children to say football guarantees you two things: injuries and disappointments. That was it. But I think it's, as you say, it's easy to look in on somebody and comment on what they are doing or what they're not doing or what they should have done without even looking at yourself or knowing when you've been in that situation.
Yeah. I think as well, we tend to like a really rational explanation for things, don't we? We like things to make sense and to be logic and a reasoned argument for, well, that happened because X, Y, and Z, when often life's way more chaotic and complex and random, and there's so much luck and chance and things like that involved, which can be quite discomforting for people. People don't like to really feel like they're not in control, and there's sort of bigger things going on around them that they don't really have any control. They just like explaining that in a certain way to help their narrative feel a little bit better. We're like, it's like with the stars of our own film, isn't it? Like we're the main character in a film, and we like our lives to make sense and have a logical
Mhm.
explanation for why you end up doing what you do. But yeah, so the stuff that I do with people tends to help them appreciate that a little bit more, see the humor in life as well, and like laugh at themselves and see the ways that we trick each other and we trick ourselves, especially.
Mhm.
Just become a bit more tuned into that. So it's thinking a bit more deeply about life. That's all it is, really.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, having spent those, I think it was 8 cohorts that we did together, and it definitely made me open up. And you start wandering around and questioning things. And I still use quite a lot of the conversations and talk about that with other people about what we've done, because a big part of what we were doing was and talking about was critical thinking. And when you look at communication and the importance of critical thinking in communication, it definitely helps for anybody listening. And even when I first started, what we were on the course with yourself was, what actually is how would you define critical thinking for people who are listening to this? That really, we all do it, we all know how to do it, but actually defining and understanding when we're doing it or when we need to do it. What is critical thinking, John?
See, my perception of it's changed a little bit. So I was an academic for like nearly 15 years, working in sports coaching predominantly, and a lot of my work was around, well, how do coaches learn? How can we help coaches learn more effectively and just be better practitioners? And critical thinking and reflection and those sorts of things, they're really buzzwords now in that field. People are onto it about the need to be like, right, you've got to be much more critical in your approach to weighing up evidence and not just doing what your best mate's doing because it looked good, or that manager on TV is doing that, so I'll do that and it'll work with my under nines and that kind of thing. So it started around that, and I'll be honest, towards the end of my academic career, I was probably getting a little bit bitter and a little bit. You put yourself up on a pedestal, don't you, where you kind of think, "Oh, look at all these people who are just cluelessly going through life, and they're not really thinking about anything, and they're just on a treadmill." And that, and you get a bit cynical, really. And I clocked that in myself in more recent years. So I tend not to use critical thinking as a term. I prefer thinking deeply. That for me is what a bit more what it's about. So thinking differently, thinking a bit more deeply about just what you're doing, like who you are, what motivates you, what do you want to get out of life? Why are you doing that? Have you genuinely chosen that? Or are you just been influenced by the people around you and culture and society and all those sorts of things? So for me, it's just about tuning in a little bit more to yourself and your genuine feelings, your instincts, your like gut feelings, not really it's sort of looked down on a little bit more. People tend to love, or they at least love the idea of science and like, well, the scientists say this, and like science is this like arbiter of everything, but
Mhm.
they don't really understand what science is and how it works. In many ways, they've been, I suppose, more surface level in the thinking because they're just outsourcing the thinking to someone else and going, well, if that expert says that, that must be true. But there'll
Yeah.
be another three experts on the other side who are saying different things. So thinking deeply for me is a bit more about that. It's weighing up things. It's tuning in more to your genuine embodied bodily sense of what do you feel in a moment. Does
Mm.
it feel right? Is the vibe off with this? Like, or are you just going along with things, like I say? And that for me was where I ended up moving after academia because I just didn't see that that was the case in academia anymore. So like the place where you would think would be the haven for deeper thinking, critical thinking, whatever you want to call it, actually wasn't, and it was almost going in the opposite direction. So for me, there was a bit of a disconnect with my values and beliefs around what education should be about,
Mhm.
just like what are the good things in life to be thinking about and how that was going. So that's why I ended up leaving academia to focus on some of that stuff. So when we first like came across each other, what, 2 or 3 years ago maybe, and you thought like the original tagline then was think critically, live authentically. And I
Yeah.
cringe a little bit about that looking back because it definitely was a bit of a sort of mocking people who weren't doing that and come with us and like you're gonna like be a better person and all that. And hopefully you would be, but it just probably wasn't framed in the right sense, really. Critical thinking, really, if you go right back into the philosophical side of it, of logic and all those things, it's definitely not that I'm into. Where there's, if you're going to have a debate with someone and you can like forensically break down the point that they're making, and then there's all these different ways of structuring that to end up at the right answer. That's not what I'm into. It's much more about think deeper, and the live authentically piece is still there. Yeah, like, are you living? Not that you need to be 100% authentic all the time, but at least are you consciously deciding how you're going to be in
Mhm.
different situations, and how much of that is genuine choice versus just acting a role, just becoming what other people want you to be in that situation. And that for me is never a good way to be. Ultimately, I think that bites you in the backside eventually when you live too much of your life in that mode of just like fitting in and um yeah, just impression managing and all that stuff.
I mean, it's a fascinating topic, the authenticity side of it. And I remember we had some brilliant chats about, can you really be authentic, or are you always trying to be in the
Yeah.
juxtaposition of somebody who is authentic, but are they being authentic or telling people they're being authentic to seem more authentic, etc. But one of the big things in communication, we had, Scottish comedian Raymond Mearns on this podcast talking about being yourself. And when you're standing up on a stage in front of people, and if you do not give the audience an authentic experience, people will feel uncomfortable immediately. And we talked about different types of comedians, for example, like Frankie Boyle and Michael McIntyre. If Michael McIntyre decided he was going to start doing some Frankie Boyle material, it's not him. It's not who he is. And the audience would just feel uncomfortable immediately because that's not who they are. And the same would be if Frankie Boyle decided to start doing Michael McIntyre. Everyone would say, I'm just uncomfortable because that's not who they are. And I think when we are communicating, trying to communicate more authentically really does help break down those barriers. But we live in a world where it's so difficult to try and be authentic all the time. So how could somebody who's listening to this and nodding in agreement to what you're saying and thinking, yeah, we need to cut through all the nonsense and try and be more authentic when we communicate. How can someone start to think, I need to be more authentic? And then how can they communicate more authentically, do you think?
I think the so you mentioned comedians there. They're a great case in point, aren't they? A lot of the great comedians were more philosophers really
Mm.
than stand-up comedians. So if you think my favorite comedian is probably George Carlin, which a lot of people would say similar. It's like just as someone who he was like authenticity off the scale by the end of his career in some ways because he tried to live that path, hadn't he?
Mm.
Of he did bits of TV and he did like it sort of jumped through all the hoops you're supposed to jump through to be a star back in the sort of 70s, I suppose, in America. But it just didn't. He just couldn't live with himself. He knew ultimately, I'm sort of living a lie here. This is not. It's maybe what audiences want to hear and what TV directors want to hear and stuff, but it wasn't truly him. So he ended up flipping it and becoming known for this, like telling it how it is and
Mm.
that sort of thing. And even like people like I'm thinking like Billy Connolly, the reason they're so funny often as comedians is they're taking a philosophical view of life. They're just observing people, aren't they? And they're onto us. They see the little ways that we trick ourselves and the little things that we do that probably are quite inauthentic. And we find them funny because they draw attention to it and we laugh along because we know that's what we're like and we know that's what we're doing. So we're laughing at ourselves in a way.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I've always thought comedians are quite philosophical in that sense, and you get a lot from them of just knowing what makes you tick, like the little things that you'll laugh at. Remember Peter Kay when he went big?
Yeah.
All he was doing was just like telling stories about things as a kid that everyone did the same, and it was just amazing, wasn't it? Because you were just recognizing yourself in the stories, but you'd probably not spoken about it in that way before. I remember when we used to do that and this, and
Yeah.
he was just on to us. So yeah, in terms of how can people be more authentic, I do think there's a choice aspect to it. You have to almost decide, well, how far am I willing to go?
Mhm.
So an example we'll often use with people is like, right, if you were going to travel up the M6, and I think there's maybe like 14 or 15 service stations on the M6, but every service station further north you go, you become more authentic. But as you become more authentic, there's less people at each stop. So it's like, how far up are you willing to go? Are you willing to go all the way to Gretna, where you're like 100% authentic, but there's only you there because no
Mhm.
one else can bear being around you? Because it's just too like it's there's a limit, isn't there, to how authentic people want each other to be. There's certain scenarios and contexts where you have just got to like not sell your soul, but you've just got to sort of fall into line with a little bit to get through that certain social situation. Now there's still a choice within that of like, are you consciously deciding that? So it's like, well, I don't really want to go on Graham's podcast here, but I don't know. Maybe it'll make him feel good, or like, so you can kind of justify it to yourself of like a way of doing it. But at least you've chosen, haven't you?
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if you think, oh, well, I've got to go on Graham's podcast because he's asked me and I can't say no, and it's like, I don't really want to, but I've no choice. That for me has been a little bit more inauthentic, isn't it? So there's that. That's where the thinking comes back in. It's like, are you thinking about things first and then making a choice based on that? That is probably way more authentic, isn't it, than just being a robot who just does what inputs are pressed and like told and reacting to stimulus in a socially conditioned way. That's very different, I think. So yeah, thinking about it, but also being really conscious of how far you're willing to go. How important is it to you to be authentic? So for me, it was pretty important. So I've made decisions in life and done stuff that a lot of people can't really understand or wouldn't really agree with because they're like, well, why didn't you just do that? Or like, and it's like, because for me, it's like it's more important to be able to sleep, put your head on the pillow and sleep at night with a clear conscience of knowing you just lived like authentically in that sense in some way.
I mean, it's interesting about how you start off today and you say about like, your courses or cohorts ruin people's lives. And obviously we're joking about it, but I suppose until you, because you really do take it for granted sometimes until you're actually questioned or thinking about it. How often do people actually sit down and think deeply about how authentic they're being? You've just mentioned about whether or not you come on my podcast. Now I've got absolute fear of how many people have been authentic or not been authentic about coming on my guests. But at the same time, we've been to social events that we don't want to go to, but we better go. We've had to conform to other social things that we've said, oh well, so and so's asked us, they've got us the tickets, we can't say no now. We don't want to go, but we have to go. But then I suppose once you start realizing that, and then you establish how much of your life you've maybe lived where you've not been authentic, or how many things you've not said when actually the true authentic person's wanted to say something, it really does make you question what you've been doing for the last. And when you suddenly
Yeah.
break that down and go, God, I'm now in my 30s or 40s or 50s, and you think, imagine how much easier my life might have been, or imagine how much more I would have moved on or been able to get that message across. It's fascinating. But one of the other big things I remember when we talked about was, and you've mentioned it a little bit already today, about changing your perception and also the value in being able to unlearn as well. You've
Yeah.
talked about, even you've been honest and open enough to say that the thing you started out with the critical think critically, think deeper, or your tagline when you had it, and you're open enough to say, I kind of cringe a little bit how we were there, but yet you're able to say now we've gone back, we've looked at what we were doing, we've unlearned, and we're happy to change how we perceive things. How important is that? But how difficult is that also for people to get their head into that space?
Huge. Um, I mean, one thing just to come back a little bit when you mentioned there about, when you look back on yourself and you think, oh God, I've been doing this for the last 20 years or 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good thing to cringe. I think there's something you're doing wrong. If say even 5 years ago, you don't cringe a little bit about just at who you were and what you believed and what you thought. And so I think it's a good thing to cringe about yourself and see the humor in that and not get down on it and go like, oh God, what an idiot, but just sort of appreciate that we
Mm-hmm.
live through different phases in life, don't you? Where you're just into different things and you're thinking in different ways. But I was doing a session recently actually with a group, and we were talking about how I can't remember the lady's name. I think it's Bonnie something or other. And she was a nurse in palliative care, so end of life care in a hospice. And she worked many years in that environment. So she spent a lot of time speaking to people who were, quite literally about to die, and they're looking back on life, reflecting on the life that they'd lived. And I think she started with a blog. She was writing blog posts about what was coming out of these conversations. and eventually it became a book and so on and so on, and went quite big. But the biggest regret that she said people had was that people wishing they'd just been themselves.
Mm.
And really, like looking back at it, they're like, God, I wish I'd just like done what I thought a bit more and lived by what I believed a bit more. And that's pretty powerful, isn't it? When you think like how many people are getting to the end of life and regretting. In many ways, for me, I just see that as not been a bit more authentic.
Mhm.
And it's sort of like it's the in between bit, isn't it? So you've got the end of life, but at the start of life, when you're a kid, you don't really give a shit, do you? You just sort of you're just a kid. You just like living life as it comes, and you just like whatever you want, you say you want it. If you don't like it, you'll start crying or
Yeah.
like have a hissy fit or whatever. That's pretty authentic. And then something happens in the middle where we start thinking, oh God, I've got to like fall into line with what society expect, and there's certain rules and things that are governing me now. And then at the end, we regret it. So I've always found that quite interesting as like, why do we do that? What is it that's motivating that behavior? Because that to me seems like it would be a good thing to clock that a bit sooner before you get to your deathbed
Oh, absolutely.
and make those changes a bit quicker. So again, that's authenticity in a way. What was your question? I've gone off on a track there. What was your question? Like
Well, it ties into
maybe
that a
prior
little bit, but like the power of unlearning and
unlearning, that was it.
changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just again, coming from an education background and being a lecturer and teaching like hundreds and probably thousands of students over the years, that's how that's all. It's all about learning, isn't it? It's all about right. What can we add in? What can we pile on top of what you already know? And it's like it's very additive, the whole process of education. Whereas often you probably got bigger bang for your buck forgetting or getting rid of something that you already know that you think's right that's probably incorrect.
Mm.
And you can have a way bigger impact on someone's just sort of way of being, and especially if it's like in a professional setting, there'll be things that people are doing that are probably holding them back, that you'd be better just not doing that. You're better stopping smoking, aren't you, than going on a mad diet and trying to be really healthy and stuff. Well, you're bigger, just stop smoking and that'll have a way bigger impact. So unlearning for me is a little bit about that. It's like, what are the things that you're doing? How many people really forensically start exploring? What do I believe around that? What have I been, how do I see this? Have I maybe got something? Because we operate on like scripts, or a lot of what we do is subconscious, isn't it? And it's just an automated thing through life. You're not thinking about every little thing you do,
Mhm.
which is amazing, but it can also trip you up because you will have just absorbed stuff that isn't true and is probably incorrect or if not harmful, but you don't really realize that that's the thing. So unlearning is just a little bit about that. It's I suppose reflecting on, yeah, why do I think that? Where did I pick that up from? Like I've been doing that for 10 years, but I've never really thought about why I chose that method over that method. And it's just exploring that a little bit, which again, you probably could call critical thinking in a way, couldn't you? Because you're just thinking a bit more about decision making and like trying to weigh up evidence and those sorts of things, and just bringing that into conscious mind. But it's difficult. It's hard to do because you're talking about really ingrained habits and ways of being and practices, especially if you're in a big business there and there's a particular culture and a way of doing things. It's really tough to be the one who puts your hand up and goes, "Hang on, I think there might be a better way of doing this."
Yeah.
It's that again takes a certain level of personality to be willing to be shot down, like put your head above the parapet and call stuff out and be willing to be ridiculed and made fun of, which again is a part of authenticity, isn't it? It's like, yeah, you can be authentic, but that might make life harder for you. So it's not just like this blue sky thing of like, well, everyone do that because it could probably make life a lot harder for you because people don't want you being authentic all the time.
Well, it's interesting. I've got two examples of what you've kind of talked about that I've come across. Number one, I don't know, I can't remember fully the name of it, but I remember there was during the February, March time last year, 2023, when the conflict in Ukraine was starting. I remember a great story flashed up on Twitter, and it was even reported by some news channels of like was it the Phantom of Kiev, and it was like a silhouette of a jet playing a fighter jet. And the story was that no one knew who this person was, but apparently in the first early stages of the Russian air raids over Kiev, some rogue pilot had jumped into a Ukrainian fighter jet and was flying through the skies of Ukraine, picking off Russian aircraft and stuff. That was a great story, and it goes back to the narrative, like what we talked about, like you want to believe a narrative and stuff like that. And then, of course, fact checkers, and I can't remember what the organization was, but came out, but it turned out to be completely nonsense, complete fabrication. And when I was doing some of the training courses I was doing, I would ask people, I'd say, has anyone ever heard of, and we talked about unlearning and being able to put your head above the parapet and sometimes change your thinking. And quite a lot of people, I said, you told anyone about that? They said, yeah, I've told quite a few folk about it. I says, it's total nonsense. And I'd get up on the board, the fact check article from the newspaper say it's complete nonsense. And you can see the disappointment in people's faces and eyes, the realization like they've been hoodwinked a little bit. But the big question I asked them is, you're going to go and tell the people that you told that what you've told them was literally a lie, complete nonsense? And most people came back and said, no.
Yeah.
To save face, because they're suddenly, and which meant that I'm saying you're quite happy that people are walking around with knowledge that you've given them that is completely false, to save your own face by having to go at them and say, by the way, just so you know, that stuff turns out to be a load of crap. It was just nonsense. That's the first example. The second example was I used to do the 10-mile time trials on the bikes, road cycling, and I used to turn up with my 300-pound Halford special road bike, and I'd be surrounded by, and I'd put a pair of shorts and t-shirt on. I'd be surrounded by these I can't remember what the collective noun for middle-aged men in lycra is. I think it's mammals, isn't it? And it would be all these guys, middle-aged men in lycra, and everyone. I mean, I'm speaking to a guy who says, "How much do your bike? This bike cost me £3,000." And you're standing in the queue getting ready to rock and roll, and he's got the speed helmet on, but he had a bit of a belly on him. This guy, quite a big belly, and emphasised by the fact that he was wearing just full lycra cycling kit for, as if he was in the Olympic Games. Speed helmet, glasses, special handlebars, and he's asking me. He says, "You'll need to get rid of your light and your bottle of water. That's like another so many 100 grams of extra weight you're carrying." And he says, "Get yourself a set of aero bars. That'll cut 30 seconds off your time. Get yourself an aerodynamic helmet. That'll cut another 25 seconds off your time." And then he goes, "Do you shave your legs?" I says, "No." I says, "What kind of like gym training program do you do?" They're like, "Oh, I don't bother with that nonsense." Uh, so, so you've got a guy there who, he probably isn't overweight as such, but he's happy to shave his legs every Thursday night and not have a water bottle with him for 10 miles of cycling in the summer. Spend thousands of pounds on his equipment, but yet wouldn't go to the gym or do any sort of training program to do all that. So it's interesting about following. You're saying the first example I've got is somebody who's not willing to show their truth by saying I was wrong there. And the other one is somebody's heard one method and gone, that's what you do to get better at your time. It's fascinating when you see that and you look at people and not see them question why they're doing what they're doing.
But that's just what I like as humans. Again, a big part of what I do is it's seeing that we are just weird, aren't we? We're a very strange species, really. When you get into what it's like to be human, we're just bizarre in many ways. The way that amazing at the same time, but we are a bit of a weird, a weird creature, and that can be good to appreciate that sometimes. But so when it comes to learning, like the ease of it, like if it's easy and it already fits your preconceived ideas, and it's just an like, so yeah, sticking the helmet on is better than going and maybe changing up your diet and eating a bit better and stuff. Just an
Mm-hmm.
eat, like the brain loves that, doesn't it? It just loves that easy, fit it in there quick. It's much more time consuming and more difficult to think about stuff in a more critical way. So it's understandable why we do it. And that's like the research I mentioned in sports coaches that I was doing. That was part of it. They love things like social media for learning because it's just there. It's on the phone. It's like I'm not having to. It's cheap. It's free. It's just dead easy to acquire stuff. And if it's cheap and easy and it's just a lot of it. It's pretty tough to ignore that, isn't it? You've got to be a pretty tough character to not take that stuff on board, especially if it's telling you what you already think you want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So if you might have built a sort of brand almost, or like a vision of who you are and what you're about. And we tend not to like inconsistency in people, do we? Like if you look at politicians and stuff, if they change their mind, it's like I cannot. What a disgrace they are! Like they don't know what they're doing. Like why would I ever vote for them again? So things like changing your mind and having a different view on something 6 months after you've said something is just a no-no in a lot of public spheres. So there's a lot of pressure on us on humans to just be in certain ways. And again, I think philosophy is a great tool to help you spot that and recognize it. But it still comes back to there's then a choice to make, like how much do you want to be more informed, more authentic and all that stuff, because it's not necessarily how society's set up for us
Mhm.
to be. Probably absolute chaos within 48 hours, wouldn't it? If everyone was just started being right, let's cut out the bullshit. Let's be proper. Let's say what we really think. Let's say what we're feeling and just genuinely be honest, especially on things like social media, it would be chaos
Aye.
pretty quick. So you have to take that and go, right, well, where's the line? Everyone's line will be different. It's just that I think some people's line was way lower than they probably thought.
Mm.
And you can open their eyes up to that and be, actually, yeah, I don't want to be on my deathbed, buddy, regretting what I've done the last 30 years, like, especially when it comes to careers and things like that. So, yeah.
It's a scary thought if everyone just starts saying what they were thinking. But
Yeah.
if you're in a leadership position and you've worked with sports coaches, you've helped with coach development, and now you work in sort of corporate environments as well, working with people in leadership roles, how easy is it to help somebody say, look, you might have them in a private environment or a sort of one-on-one session or something, and they're open enough to say, I'm going to have to communicate to the group of people that I've been communicating with for years. I'm going to have to go back on what I've been communicating. I've either have to change the way I do it, which is going to make people's eyebrows raised a little bit, or I'm going to have to change some of the stuff I've been saying or how I've been saying it. How how would you go about that? How can somebody, instead of, is it as simple as flicking a switch? So Friday night, go home after work, wake up Monday morning, go, today's the day I'm going to be a completely different communicator, or change my message as that from the what I've been saying previously, or does it take time to sort of over time bring that in and bring people into the conversation as well?
I think on an individual level, it can be instant. Like I'd say, yeah, I'll work with people in groups and they'll go home over a weekend. They'll split up with a boyfriend or girlfriend, partner or whatever. They may even like decide to leave roles and like have
Mm.
a career change. It can be that instant because it's just like they know that's what they've been thinking, but they've maybe never really had someone who's just teased it out a little bit with them. But their gut was probably telling them that anyway.
Yeah.
So on an individual level, stuff can happen really, really, really quick for good and bad. Like that, it's not always a positive thing. I think on an organizational level, culture basically trumps all when it comes to that. It doesn't really matter.
Mm.
Even if you have several individuals who start changing and maybe questioning things, if the culture doesn't celebrate that and empower that, it'll just like you banging your head against a brick wall. So the actual culture changes are much bigger ship to turn around. It's a much bigger beast. However, you might have cultures that are generally quite open and, they maybe recruit a certain type of person and a certain worldview and they might have a different mission and all those sorts of things, which generally just means they're quite open to innovation and creativity and change and that's celebrated. So in those sorts of business, yeah, you can go and you can have a really big influence pretty quick because they're just on board with that anyway. But if
Yeah.
you're going to go into it and it's like, right, well, we've been a certain way, typical big corporate, and this is how we've been. And these are all really quite structured systems and processes, and just like exactly when it comes to communication as well, and just how we communicate with each other within a business. That's a really difficult. You're not just going to change that with getting someone like me in to start ruining lives. To question what the purpose is and stuff. It's not gonna happen. But on an individual level, it can. That
Yeah.
just then means that a person in such a culture has got a big decision to make, haven't they? Because
Yeah.
once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's a bit like the classic film people will often mention is The Matrix, isn't it? Where it's like the blue pill, red pill
Mm.
like decision that Neo has in that, and it's like, does he go with what is really going on and sort of reality, or does he just ignorance is bliss and kind of keep his head down? At the end of the day, people have got mortgages to pay, they've got families, stuff costs a fortune these days, doesn't it? It's
Yeah.
like there's then all the status games and just the way that people perceive value and success and all those things. So it's a tough. It takes a really confident, well-grounded, tough mind, I think, to see all that and go, do you know what? Yeah, I'm going. I can't remember. Was it the red pill he has? I think that is the let's go into reality. I think it takes a tough personality to do that, and it's not for everyone. So, like you said earlier on, like when I said to you that you leave with more questions than answers. Some people are just like, yeah, see you later, John. That ain't for me. I want some answers. Just give me some answers. Tell me what to do. Tell me how I should be. And that's what they want, because that's maybe just what they're used to. They're used to that, like just going with what other people say rather than genuinely thinking for themselves and tuning into themselves. So it's not for everyone, and it can scare a lot. You've got to be careful. You can do a bit of damage with people as well if you're not careful. You've got to be really switched on to who you've got in front of you. Because I know I laugh and I do see the humorous side of it, and it's a way of just how I interact with people generally. But you've got to be careful with that at the same time. Like you're playing with people's, like big life decisions, and like you're thinking about life and death stuff often, aren't you, when it comes to what's meaning and purpose and all those things. Yeah, it's not an easy way out for people.
No, I mean the culture word. I mean, it's everywhere, isn't it? Culture, 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 and I think in the last, I don't know, 5 years, maybe more longer. That's what the buzzword. Everyone talks about the cultures within organisations, the cultures within sports environments. We hear it all, and it goes back again. I suppose the authenticity. One of the phrases I loved hearing is like values have to be lived, not laminated. And how easy is it to put people together and say, right, this is what sounds like it should be our values, which will shape our culture, and then instantly you're just seeing somebody strapping lines onto things and saying this is how we're going to live, but realistically you're not going to see that. I remember doing some work with some coaches, and we were talking about the environment that we want to set. There was a rugby club, and everyone was talking about like fun. What's our values? What do we want to have our values as? And it's fun, inclusive, family orientated. And they went through all this, and then we got to one guy who's the only person in the room who was an ex-professional rugby player, and he apologized, but said like, you know, winning, success has to be a value. We have to high standards. We at the end of the day, we're playing competitive sport, and we have to try and make sure that yes, we still can be fun, we can still have family, we can still be inclusive, but at the same time, like I won't be here and being able to convince people that we're not winning games of rugby, but everyone's having a great time and we all feel like one big family. So he had to break it down into that. How difficult is that for somebody then, or to communicate values that are actually truth and honestly, sorry, but at the same time might not might not fit into social structure if you're in that environment. Like that poor guy, the ex-professional rugby player, just saying like, I'm sorry, but I want everyone to have fun, but we have fun when we're winning. I put winning as my number one value instead of honesty.
Yeah,
In that sense.
it goes the other way though as well, doesn't it? I think people know when you're bullshitting. Like, deep down, you just get a sense of someone. You know when they're talking the talk.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so we were talking earlier, weren't we, before you started recording about LinkedIn? Like, I can't stand LinkedIn as a place to visit on the internet. It has to be one of the most inauthentic places you can go, because it is just full of people impression managing, trying to like convey certain things. Most of it, like we said, is not even written by them now. It's chat GPT and tools like that. And it's just this really fake, quite bizarre world I find of people just like pretending they're something,
Mm-hmm.
or pretending that they're feeling or they think something, which clearly isn't what they think. There's way more going on underneath the surface that I think everyone on there kind of knows. We all know that that's what people are doing, but everyone sort of accepts it. And I was like, why doesn't someone? I know there's a few rogue accounts who. There's a good one on Twitter. I think it's called the State of LinkedIn, and it'll be like, like look at the state of this post.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of virtue signaling and all that stuff. And to me, it's just like I just do not want. What's the point? Even if you like start getting clients through it, or
Yeah.
customers or job offers and things, it's like, well, what's the point if that's on the back of you not being who you are generally? So I think that you've got to be careful that way. Yes, there's the difficulty of being authentic and then what might be the consequences. But also you've got to be careful. Like there's consequences of being inauthentic because people can spot it generally. And generally, the people that you would rather be around, I think, would be the people who, yes, there'll be little bits come in, but generally, you sort of know that they're roughly who they are. What you say is what you get, or what you see is what
Mm.
you get. That's really high performing environments, isn't it? Generally, people kind of coming in, they are who they are. Everyone's comfortable with that. Everyone can be different, and they appreciate difference and that sort of thing. They tend to be way more high performing than when you've got people coming in who are just like acting. It may as well be a soap opera. They're just acting roles and they're saying things that everyone's sat there going, "I know you don't believe that," but no one's
Yeah,
calling it out.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that for me is just a bit of a weird way to go through life that I think is going to end up with you being on your deathbed going, like, why did I do that? Just to get a few likes on frigging LinkedIn or whatever. Pointless to me.
So how can someone do that, John? I mean, I'm in that position. I mean, I try my best to try and make sure that when I am putting content out, and I think when we do these podcasts, that's why I much prefer to do a podcast episode, a recording with people, because it's from my way of getting content out, it's an easier way to make sure I'm getting my full self across to people instead of having to write a glossy article. Now, I'll fully hold my hands up. I write these glossy articles. I'll also,
Oh, I've done it in the past, by the way.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I'm not. Again, I'm not putting myself on a pedestal. I
No,
think
no,
me recognize it in myself led me to
yeah, and I'm conscious when I haven't, when I look at the authenticity barometer and I say to myself, where do I want to stand here? Because at the same time as making sure I'm getting my point across, I'm also needing to conform to what needs to be, what performs well or better on LinkedIn.
yeah.
Because from a business perspective, it's trying to get that, as you've said, is trying to get through there. But you're right. When we're in these status games or something like that, when you've got to try and put, I've got a group chat with 2 or 3 mates, and yeah, one or two of them, when a screenshot gets taken of their LinkedIn post and
Yeah.
put into the group chat, and you go, "What the hell's this nonsense?"
Yeah,
And
because
and
they know
yeah,
that's not you.
yeah.
They're just onto you, aren't they? That's the
Well, that's
yeah,
kept me. That's what in that group. That's kept my head in a place where I'm like, I'm not going to try. I'm going to try my best not to, because I don't want to be the guy on the receiving end of someone taking a screenshot of one of my LinkedIn posts, putting it into my group chat. It's just friendly banter between a group of us. But how can you break through that then in a world where we live so much on social media and putting ourselves out there? How can somebody start to find that right balance between communicating in that way where they're having to be in the game, but at the same time make sure they hold their values and their authenticity straight and true?
first off, and this is just me, like personal opinion. This is not based on anything. I think you've got to be genuinely good at what you do.
Mm-hmm.
First off, like so people like everyone's talking the talk on LinkedIn, even like the job titles and stuff that you see and like the bios and things. It's like if you were that good, there's no way you would have the time to be on here banging out a post every day. Like it's like, like a 2,000 word flipping essay about, like some really like indirect way of basically bigging yourself up and saying you're like a genius at doing something. It's like you wouldn't be on it. Without a doubt, the most elite, high performing people I know and work with and come across, you don't even see never been near social media.
Yeah.
They're just good at what they do, and the way that they get more work and seen is just purely by work, is by doing a good job.
Yeah.
People talking to each other, person to person, recommending, and they're just nowhere near social media to pro. It's often a reverse signal for me now. If someone's posting a lot about something they do or offer, it's probably the opposite signal that they're not doing that well, and they don't
Mm.
have anywhere near as many clients and achievements than they'd like you to think because they just wouldn't have the time to be on there. It wouldn't be on the radar. They're too busy actually getting shit done in the real world. So
It's
I think there's we mentioned Chat GPT. I think the way that the world's going with artificial intelligence and technology generally, I think that we probably will see a bit of a renaissance of genuine human contact and interaction and just genuine good work,
yeah.
like just good standards of people who are genuinely, Graham, he's flipping amazing at that. He's who you want to go and speak to, not the guy on LinkedIn with a million posts about communication or whatever.
Yeah.
Just general human contact. So even the post, like we say, so much of it's not even written by a human anymore. So it's like, what's the point? Why would I want to come and work with you? as a human being, like maybe bring you into my organization or my team or whatever. Why would I want to work with you if you can't even write your own flipping content just because you try to like cut a few, like corners and like get the headline to like really pop for the algorithm and all that stuff? Just no interest. You may be really good at doing that, but does that mean you can actually do what you're saying you can do?
Yeah.
Because I just like, for me, it's like, yeah, like you, Danny, you mentioned, like he's very much like that as well. It's like talk doesn't cook rice. That's the name of our podcast, isn't it? All the talk in the world you want, but you've got to be able to deliver in real life, in real situations, and do what you say you can do. And if you can do that, there'll there'll never not be work for you. People will always pay money to people who are good at stuff and can do stuff that they can't do. And I just think it's always been that way. And that's, yes, it's a little bit more grey now because of AI and stuff, but I think that'll eventually just, the blaggers will be exposed and the people who are talking the talk, they'll eventually get exposed and people will revert to like, no, genuine good humans who are authentic, they're deep thinkers, and they're in it for the right reasons, not just making a quick buck. They're the ones who will eventually. But I think it's always been like that in any trade and
Yeah.
business a lot of the time.
Word of mouth, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
that's. I mean, it's interesting since you've even mentioned that the high performance that I two or three people who I know have really, really, really successful businesses and have done really, really well in those environments. They don't use LinkedIn at all. And I keep saying, why do you not use? They're on it. They've got a massive network of people who purely down to people who want to connect with them because of who they are. But at the same time, you'll never see a post coming up or an article. And usually because A, they don't need to, because they've already got the businesses through and the job that they're doing, and B, they just don't have time to dedicate to that. So it's a fascinating topic there. I want to move on to another sort of one of the main key areas that you covered in your Being Well course is anxiety. We live in a world full of it right now. And when you look at the mental health side of things, anxiety plays a huge role in that. But also, we've all been there when we've got the sweaty palms, the dry mouth, the churning feeling in our stomach before we step out to speak to either a job interview or even going out onto a stage or delivering a presentation to people. It's a horrible feeling to have. So, what kind of things do you talk about when it comes to anxiety in your courses there?
So on the Being Well course, that like I said earlier is very much existential philosophy, and that's what a lot of those guys were really into. So the final session on that course is actually focuses on Soren Kierkegaard, who was a Danish philosopher way back in the sort of 1800s. And he pretty much invented the word anxiety, pretty much like angst and anxiety.
Mm,
That originated with a lot of his work. And what the existentialist was saying really is that the root of anxiety is freedom and choice. And that is what makes humans feel those, whether you would call them emotions or feelings, as we could probably debate that, but that's ultimately what's the core. It's the fact that as a human being, within reason, you have pretty much got unlimited choice on how you spend your life, what you could
mm,
become, where you go. In modern day Western society now, you can pretty much do anything
mm,
as an average. Like, obviously, there's people who are just born into like really, really tough, conditions. And yes, they've got way less choice, but they probably still have got choice. You've got choices on how to live your life and how you're gonna be. And Kierkegaard was one of those who was saying that's what like terrifies people. And then people on that course, like Jean-Paul Sartre, like one of the French existentialists, like much later on, he talked about our existence precedes our essence. So you are born, but you don't really have a point before you're born. You're just born, you exist. And it's
mm,
like, shit, what am I going to do now? Whereas like most objects come into the world with an essence, don't they? So if you need to bang some nails in, you go, all right, well, I'll get that bit of wood there. I'll forge some steel or whatever, and I'll put that on the end of it, and now I've got a hammer. And the
mm,
purpose of that hammer is to bang nails in. It has an essence before it exists. We don't have that as humans. We're just here, and it's like, right, what are you going to do now? And
mm,
Sartre and Kierkegaard and all those guys were saying, right, that's like there's a responsibility on you now because you've got to decide. And probably what makes it even worse these days is there's so much more choice because of the wonders of things like technology and just the way society is structured, it's like there's a million ways you can eat a sandwich. Like if you go in a sandwich shop and you look at a menu, it's like friggin' hell, which one do I get? Because there's
Yeah.
so many flipping fillings and life is just like that, magnified. Like every little decision you have, there's loads and loads of options. And the existentialist basically said, yeah, that terrifies humans, and they end up. So to bring it back to authenticity, Sartre talked about something called bad faith.
Mm.
And that's where it's like, oh God, I don't really want to know who I'm going to become or what I should do, or I can't decide. I know I'll just be that. And they start acting a role. So his famous example was a waiter in a restaurant who, he dresses a certain way, he moves in a certain way, his tone of voice is a certain way when interacting with customers, and just the way he is in the restaurant. But he's not a waiter, he's a bloke acting the role of a waiter. And that was bad faith for Sartre. And a lot of people are living in bad faith in that way because they don't like having all that choice because it's just too frightening. It's like, well, what if I make a mistake? What if I get it wrong? And
Yeah.
Kierkegaard and that were like, yeah, you might do. You don't know until you choose, but you've got to choose. So anxiety for them was quite rooted in that of just overwhelming choice and freedom about how you should live.
Mm.
And that been just really, really discomforting for people. So we end up being inauthentic in all these different ways to sort of keep that feeling pushed down and ignore it a little bit.
When I work with a couple of people who have been working on anxieties and stuff like that, and it's interesting you said about it. We 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 go through the what ifs for preparation. And I think there's a difference between practicing and preparing. You can practice and practice and practice in front of the mirror, and you can get your speech or your what you're going to say to somebody, your interview or whatever. You can get it absolutely spot on, practiced in front of a mirror, but then you've not covered the anxieties that you might have. What if the sound quality doesn't work, for example, in a podcast? I've been preparing for this podcast all weekend, basically thinking about what we're going to be talking about, and or what if I forget what I'm about to say? What if we lose our train of thought?
Yeah.
And I think then, as you've said there, when you break it down to these philosophers who are looking at it saying choice, and what if I make the wrong choice? It's that what if section of the question is really, really important to hone in on. People often ask with the comedians, again, I've spoken to is, how do you deal with a heckler? And most comedians that you speak to, they'll tell you it doesn't happen very often.
No.
Unless they do crowd work, it's often very rarely does it actually happen. But what they do is they go, well, what if it does happen? I'll be able to try and work it out like that way, or have something prepared to be able to deal with that, and make sure and ensure myself I don't let it get me off what I was trying to do in the first place. But
But
that's
you
the
can
thing.
even strip it back, can't you? So it's like, well, what if you just don't do the show? What if you don't do the podcast? Why are you even doing the podcast? Like, if you explore that, what's the point of us having this chat now?
Yeah.
That's way deeper than just, well, what if the sound doesn't work? Or what if, I
Yeah.
don't know, like I forget that question or something? Yes, that's quite a functional level thing, isn't it? But sometimes, like, have people really thought about, well, like, why am I even doing this? Like, if I'm feeling this,
Mm.
why am I going on a stage? I'm probably not earning that much. Maybe a lot of comedians, it's like brutal, isn't it?
Oh,
Like
of
just
course.
trying to like earn a living. Why the hell am I doing this? Is there a genuine, deep rooted, just like overriding purpose that I want to do this because it's who I am and and I'm like, I'm all in. I'm going for this because it's what I want to do. Versus, well, are you just a comedian because you maybe fell into it because you had a family member who was a comedian when you were growing up or something, and it's like you've just sort of fallen into stuff rather than genuinely grasping it and taking control. But then you get back to freedom, don't you? Because it's like, well, if I'm not a comedian, well, what am I going to do? Like, and it's like we could be anything. You could literally, if you've got a phone now and an internet connection, there's kids on YouTube making like millions a year just like opening boxes of toys and stuff. It's like, and you're like worrying why people are going to laugh or not at this thing, and like do anything. You don't have to be doing this. So often I think that can jolt people out of those more in the more. Yes, like at the end of the day, if it is, it's like, do you know what? Because I want to be the best comedian in the world and I'm all in and this is my calling. And I'm like, nothing gives me more pleasure in life than making people laugh. Brilliant. Then you can start tweaking at more the finer edges of things like, stage anxiety and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's loads of like people like, psychology is pretty big now, isn't it? There's loads of
Yeah.
people out there who are helping with those sorts of things. I just wonder sometimes if the layers back never really get explored
Mm.
or not as enough as they could do.
Mm.
Because there may be deeper seated things of like, I maybe there is an inauthentic piece. Your body knows, doesn't it? Your body's kind of tuned in before your brain. And if you're not living in a way that's congruent with how you genuinely are as a person, you feel that in your body first, don't you? Like, which is why, like you said, you get the sweaty palms and the goosebumps and all
Yeah.
that. That's an embodied thing. It's not your brain so much doing that. In a way, it's body first, and then you post rationalize. Oh, it was because of this and that.
Mm.
So sometimes, yeah, I think philosophy can help with that. It's like actually the anxiety I'm feeling. Where is that rooted? And what is some of it? And when you start unpicking that, people can go like, shit, yeah. Like actually, I wish I was a florist. I didn't even want to be a comedian. It's just because my dad was and now I am. And like you're down that path, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it can open you up to then more possibility and things, whilst appreciating shit. There's loads of freedom here. And there's no obvious choice. There isn't a right answer. I don't know until I do it.
I suppose it comes back to asking these questions again. You worked with sports, performers in your career. You still do. And when you're working with these individuals, if they are showing signs of anxiety and things like that, is that the process you would do is get them to go deeper into finding out why they are actually really anxious about what they're doing? Because I mean, the thing is, we all suffer from anxiety at certain points before we go and do something, and it is that unknown element of things which we don't like to have. But there's always going to be that through your life. If you put yourself out there, there's always going to be that. So if you're performing at a high level, you will encounter anxiety. But how many people, like you said, want to say, well, I'm just going to jack it in and become a florist, or whether I'm going, or actually look into it and go how they can control and manage it and then move forward then?
I mean, there's certain things in there that are way beyond my expertise. That's it. So that might be there may be things in there that genuinely I like a performance psychology thing. So if you're, I don't know, an elite athlete doing whatever, and you're in a big moment or a big tournament or match or whatever, I'm probably not the person you want to be speaking to in many ways at that level.
Mm-hmm.
But it could be there could be like more of an existential underpinning philosophical aspect that could help with that because a lot of the like I said, psychology is pretty widespread now. It's pretty mainstream
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, like again, philosophically, anxiety is a good thing, isn't it? Because it shows that, or it can show that you do care. You are bothered
Yeah.
about whether it's winning or coming across well. So it can often be a motivational thing of like, well, yeah, like it's good to be.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the best people in the world, whoever I've come across, and when you do like, they all get nervous. Like
Mm-hmm.
they maybe look like they've got the shit completely together and they're just like on it. But I guarantee they like it's part of being human, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unless you're pretty much like a psychopath with just zero empathy for anything, and like it's like, yeah, you're probably going to be nervous. That's part of it, and it can be a good thing rather than a something you need to suppress and push down. So it's
Mm-hmm.
maybe more for me. It's like it's just understanding where is that anxiety rooted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it at that like deeper, more fundamental level? Is it just a flipping act? I'm going to go out on stage and there's 20,000 people here,
Mm-hmm.
and Netflix are filming it for my special. And if I bomb, this is going to be an absolute embarrassment. That's probably different, isn't it? To do I even want to be a comedian?
Yeah. Well, I watched the Robbie Williams documentary.
Yeah,
I'm not exposing myself as a secret Take That fan growing up or anything
but
like that.
that was brutal to watch, wasn't it? Because it
It
was
was.
so much like just brutal. Because that was very existential. A lot of that stuff
Yeah.
that was going on, like from such a young age, he's been on that path.
Yeah.
And there's a persona that's been created that probably isn't him because it wasn't. He's on stage and he's like fans are thinking he's amazing and he's like having a breakdown pretty much because he literally doesn't want to be there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's I think it's the one before he does his Leeds performance, and it's all built up from the UK media on his tour. They've absolutely slaughtered him, and he's
Yeah,
coming back, and it's the one that's been filmed, and it's like you've just said, it's like that one with the next Netflix documentary, etc. But he wasn't going out. His body and everything was telling him
yeah.
the fight or flight was kicking in. And his manager said, "You're going to have to, otherwise, this will ruin
He
us."
was he was liable, wasn't he? For he
Yeah.
was on the hook if they didn't deliver those gigs. Yeah,
You see his fate. I mean, like there was a lot of chat at that time about Robbie Williams and his substances and stuff like that. But I think if you looked at that, the way his eyes were, the way his body was on that stage, a lot of people cynically would have said, "Look at him, he's off his head." But actually, knowing what we know now, having watched the documentary now, whether he had taken any substance or not, we don't know. But what was actually happening to his body with the fear of being in that position is just frightening and incredible that he was even able to get out there. But yeah, I suppose one of the things when we're talking about communicating and stuff is it's the preparation that helps you with that, so you can understand how you're feeling, when you're going to be feeling it, and what you do to be able to conquer that. But it's a fascinating subject and something that probably puts more people off speaking publicly than anything else. Is just
Yeah.
not wanting to do it with that feeling. The last thing I want to talk about is you've mentioned the phrase bullshit a few times. It's a big sort of, I mean, we discussed it in the cohort that we did, and it opened my eyes massively. And you're very much driven towards the sort of not just bullshit as a phrase, but as an actual concept, I suppose, when it comes to communicating. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts and talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it genuinely is a philosophical concept. Bullshit. There was a professor, I think he was at Stanford, and he died last year actually, called Harry Frankfurt, who wrote this really small, it's like a tiny little pocketbook called On Bullshit. And he was the first person really to sort of conceptualize, look, this thing that goes on all the time. Everyone knows what it is, everyone does it, but no one's ever really explored why that is. And he wrote this just a really nice little short book on bullshit. And it's grown since then. So it's quite a big body of research. It's a genuine like subject, a topic
Yeah,
of research and exploration. And that was the last paper I did actually before I left academia, was looking at bullshit in a sports setting, so sports science and coaching and
yeah,
medicine, nutrition, all those things. And we did like a big survey looking at just like there's different tools you can use now to measure, you know, people's perceptions of, does it exist, how often do they do it, and all that stuff. And we basically found that it was pretty rife in sports. So people knew it existed, people knew they did it. And it was almost just like accepted. Yeah, this is just part of what that world is like. Like bullshit almost makes the world go round
it
in
was that.
some ways in that setting. And like we could have done a whole chat just on that, but there's really nice little insights into there's different types of bullshit. There's like evasive bullshit and there's persuasive bullshitting. So you know, like when you're trying to avoid the truth and kind of avoid consequences and things, you use it to evade. And then persuasive is a bit like the LinkedIn thing. That's
Yeah,
persuasive bullshit into a T, where people are trying to persuade you that you know what you're on about and you're an expert and a guru and you've got all the knowledge. That's persuasive bullshitting often. But Frankfurt, one of the things I liked about him was so people tend to think they know what they mean when it comes to bullshit,
mm,
and they know what they mean when it comes to lying. And it's like, which is worse, lying or bullshit? And Frankfurt was like bullshit, because at least the liar knows what the truth is. So to lie about something, you have to know what's true, don't you?
mm.
In order to convince someone of the opposite or try and pull the wool over their eyes. Whereas like bullshitters don't care. You're not really concerned with truth as a bullshitter because you just try to convince someone that something is the case, or you know something, or whatever. So it's like bullshitters are a way worse force in society than liars are, because they just don't have any concept of truth and that sort of thing. So it's a really fascinating topic actually when you dig down into it. And it's
Oh,
quite a I love it as well, because when you see research papers that people do on it, they've always got like genius titles, because it's just like such a fun word in many ways, isn't it? They'll come up with these really like just engaging titles for research. So so yeah, again, it's one of those things. It really is like a glue that binds a lot of communication
mm.
in the world in pretty much every setting you can think of. But until Frankfurt, no one had really dug into, hang on, like, why do we do this? What's going on? Like, this can't be a good thing that we're all just bullshitting. And everyone knows that people are bullshitting. But we accept that as that's just the way the world is. And that was me in my really cynical phase at the an academic career, like going, yeah, look, it's just all bullshit. This, look at this. Here's some proof that you're all just talking shit, and it's just like a bit of a farce. And that's where that came from, yeah. But it is a topic on different courses and things that I do now on programs because I think it's such a good light to shine on people as a reflective tool and getting to think, actually, yeah, like that's mad, isn't it? Why do I do that? Like,
Yeah.
what is going on there? It's crazy, really.
Well, that question you ask about being, would you rather tell somebody a lie or would you rather be known as a bullshitter? It's a fascinating place to put yourself in. You know, because I will have to first of all say it was that paper that you wrote that actually first drew my attention to you.
Right. I couldn't get it published though. That's the thing. It's never been published. Like, because
Yeah,
whenever we submitted it, they were like, "Nah, this isn't going in any journals." That's a whole different argument. The merits of even publishing in
yeah.
scientific journals these days. But that was, yeah, that sort of was like the final thing that just made me chuckle. Of like, yeah, you can't even get this published.
So I mean, how does someone detect it? I mean, what kind of things? What for people listening to this, and how do they detect first of all what they're consuming being bullshit, but also what could they detect in terms of how they're communicating to try and bring themselves in a position where ah, I'm not going to fall into the trap of being a bullshitter or put the information out in the way that it's supposed to be done.
You just reminded me of a story. Then I can't remember who it was or the guy's name, but there was a I think it was quite a famous story of some like high level executive or sort of business mogul sort of vibe, and his chauffeur would obviously drive him around. So when he was talking at conferences and things, his chauffeur would be there in the crowd listening. So basically, he's memorized this guy's speech on a particular topic. And to cut a long story short, it was along the lines of like he takes ill like at really short notice, the main guy,
Mm.
and they're like, shit, we can't cancel. And he's like, well, the chauffeur can do it. He knows it as well as me. Like, put him in. So he goes on the stage and he can regurgitate the speech and the talk. But as soon as there's any questions and they're probing around, he hasn't got a clue and he just like absolutely bombs on it. And it's just a message of like, how much of what you know do you really know? Like
Mm.
on a deep fundamental level versus just that surface level repeating a talking point or repeating a mantra that's politics is rife with it, which is a lot of the bullshit research originated there when you had Trump and it was like trendy, wasn't it? The misinformation stuff and how elections were getting swayed by Facebook and all those sorts of things. That's where a lot of that stuff was grounded. So yeah, it's obviously it's really tough these days because we are bombarded with so much information now. There's no point in history really where you would ever have to like you were on about Ukraine before. Like, why do we even need to know about half of this stuff that we're exposed to? Like, why have you? That's what Frankfurt said on the bullshit stuff in many ways. A reason that a lot of people bullshit is because you're expected to have an opinion
Yeah,
on like loads of stuff that like how are you meant to know what's going on in Ukraine and
yeah.
the inner politics of war and who's doing what and who said what and who's at fault here and there. Yeah, you're expected to have an opinion on that.
Mm.
So Frankfurt was like, we just end up bullshitting so that you don't come across as an idiot who doesn't really know anything. Like, whereas really she just said, you know what? I've seen some little bits on the news, but I haven't got a clue. I don't know what's going on, to be honest. So sometimes it can be that having a bit of humility, I think, and just admitting when you don't know something like that, bring that back a little bit. People just happy to admit when they don't know. So if someone says, Graham, what do you think about, this like Bitcoin or like, just ranting, it's like, I've seen like 4 tweets on it in my life. Like I've read half an article and it bored me. I've no idea. Just say that rather than
Yeah.
like trying to pretend you know about everything and you've got an opinion on everything. That would probably cut out a lot of problems for a lot of people. Just resisting that expectation to have an opinion.
Yeah.
And if it's something that is important, you do need an opinion, then yeah, like go and like consult a few different sources and try and get underneath the surface of the sound bites
Mm.
and come to a reasoned opinion rather than just like, well, that guy on Twitter's got 1 million followers. He must know what he's on about. I'll just repeat that.
In the episode I recorded with Pat Nevin, he talked about the importance of formulating your point from both sides as well. So don't we live in a very polarized society where, with algorithms, particularly if you're on the red side, all your tweets will show you information from the red side. If you're on the blue side, same thing. So you can always obviously just be exposed to one side of every argument and stuff like that. Not having
he's a commentator now, Pat Nevin, isn't he?
yeah.
So he's a good example of what we talked about earlier. Like if he's doing a game live and stuff's happening in the moment, he has to have an opinion, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So he has to comment on what he's seeing on the game, and that's his job. But there's been loads of stuff where he's just doing it on the fly, and he's just like, "Well, I've got to have an opinion. I don't really know why he did that, or what the manager's tactics were in that moment, or why he made that substitution." He's just doing it on the fly because society expects him to have an opinion and a thing. And yes, he can do it from his own experience, but it is bullshit in a way because he doesn't know.
Well, that's what one of the things he kind of touched upon was also like, having the empathetic side to say, from being, looking at it from his own perspective and being able to say, I've been in that situation before, and this is, and I can see why that's happened from that perspective. But at the same time, until you actually have the actual absolute facts, then it can't be. But then, John, on another side of it, story embellishing. We've talked a lot about comedians, and you mentioned already Billy Connolly. Billy Connolly used to say, he hated it when people from his past would be in his at his shows, because he would be telling a story of something that happened, and that's what comedians do. Is a lot of the time it's can spoil the illusion, but they'll maybe look at embellishing a part of a story to make it funnier. And he said that he said he was a liar. He said that he made a career out of telling lies, but making them funny. But I suppose it was bullshit in one sense, because what he was doing was maybe adding little bits, or maybe not getting to the full truth of it. But sometimes a little sprinkle of bullshit can do wonders for something, could it not?
Yeah. Not least when you're working with people and it's performance focused, so you're trying to help them perform better.
Right.
It's almost like anything goes, isn't it? Like if you've got that one little thing that's going to switch them on in a certain way, that is going to make them get that extra 1 or 2%, then is bullshit bad in that? It's quite Machiavellian. You can go down that route, can't you? Where it's like um, I suppose you're talking about like deceit. Is it deceitful, and are you sort of like manipulating people and you're getting in their head that way and things? But if the goal is like performance, that then again you can go back philosophical, can't you? Because you're bringing like a moral, ethical angle, and well, what's cheating? Where's the line? Like all those things, which is the perennial discussion in sport, isn't it? Of what's fairness, and when does fairness merge into cheating and deceit and all those things. So again, it always ends up back at philosophy in the end.
I mean, that's another hour and 20 minutes conversation we probably could have on that, but it is fascinating. John, we finish every podcast episode by asking our guests, what are your key fundamentals when it comes to communication? I'm really excited to hear what you've got for this.
Well, you've never asked me that before until so it's not like I've got anything like a list that I have in my head prepped. No. Based on what we've just discussed for the last hour or so. I think for me it does come back to authenticity. I think when you're trying to communicate stuff, it's way harder if you're acting and it's like people will have like 7 or 8 characters that they maybe play in different contexts and settings with different people, and I just think that gets tiring, doesn't it? Like you've got to remember, hang on, who am I here? Like what's my vibe there? What did I say there 2 weeks ago when they asked me this? And that's so much harder than genuinely just saying what you think and you truly believe. And I'm not saying that that's possible to just be, like I said at Gretna, 100% authentic, but it's way less tiring. It's way easier. You're not having to continually tactically play in your head with different people, like the message and how consistent am I being and all that stuff. If you're just yourself, you're just yourself. You don't have to remember anything, do you?
Yeah.
You just turn up and it's just like you say it how it is. Now that doesn't necessarily mean you'll be a good communicator, because like you said, there's like bullshit can make a story sound better. It can make something more impactful and all those things. Humor and like, there's no point if you're really not that humorous trying to be a comedian. It's just not going to work, is it? But people do that. They play roles like Sartre's waiter and bad faith. So I always think as much as you can stay true to a little bit of the core self, whatever that is of you, I think that's easier in the long run because you just don't have to play the games as much, and it just takes the pressure off, and you can just be in the moment, be a lot more present with people,
Mhm.
which I think comes across to people.
Yeah.
People know when you're blagging them. They know when that you're just saying stuff because you want a certain thing out of them. Especially when it comes to selling and things like that. No one likes a salesman, do they? And they just know they've been sold a script, and it's like that's back to authenticity for me. You just your genuine self, warts and all. Some people won't like you, some people will, but I tend that you sleep better at night the more like that you are because you're not having to play those games.
Right. No, well, listen, John, thank you very much. How can anyone find you? If anyone's listening to this and they want to hear a bit more, or they want to maybe look at your book, or they want to think about hearing your Talk Doesn't Cook Rice podcast, or even join one of your cohorts, how can anyone find you?
So the book that Danny and I wrote, I think still has its own website. It's just beingwell.pro. And it's if you go on Amazon, it's on there if people fancy reading that. Um, Me, it's just my own name, johnstoskowski.com. Everything's under there if people fancy having a look at that.
Brilliant. I'll stick some of the links in the bio. John, thank you so much for that. That's a great insight into what you do. And even this morning, as we're recording this, I'm going to be walking around with my head in plenty of different thoughts and asking myself loads of questions after that. Really enjoyed it. Cheers, John.
No worries. Hopefully that's not bullshit though. That's truth you're telling
That's the truth.
there.